Hello there, Spencer.
Hello.
How's life? I heard on a podcast today, apparently after World War II, instead of saying like, how's things or how are you doing, they would say, how's the war? Meaning your own individual something or other battle. I want to bring that back.
Yeah.
Well, they mentioned like, now we would say, how's your pandemic? Like, oh, it's great, you know. Kids got the Ebola and the dogs got the bubonic, you know. Spencer, big news.
Big news?
As the listeners who listened, was that last episode before, whenever we were talking about the free ride apparatus.
It was a couple episodes ago, I believe.
We, I don't think we were too harsh, but we weren't quite kind. But the good folks at Free Ride seem to have heard our critiques, and it definitely was from us.
Yeah, oh, yeah. I definitely.
Yeah, it was definitely because of us that they are releasing, because I couldn't find a price for it, so I don't think it's out yet, the Free Ride Alpha, Spencer, which, as you may know from the previous Free Ride, was like e-ink, and it was like a Kindle on a keyboard, and you said it looked like a Fisher-Price toy, and we made fun of it fairly hard. But this new one just looks like a keyboard, and I think it looks a lot better. But it looks just like a keyboard with a little, what color would you say that is? Like a greenish screen.
Yeah.
Very small screen, but long. It's like a big rectangle. It is based after the old Alpha word processors, which I think were discontinued in 2000. And those are what I said you can buy on Amazon, I think, in the last episode. So essentially what it is no more e-ink for this one, just a really crappy screen that shows like a sentence or two at a time.
It reminded me, you know, like how you get those, they have like those little board things you can set on your lap for like your laptop or whatever, like those little like little mini tables for, you know. And
the screen looks like
it just
a calculator screen.
It just reminded me of that, just with the keys on it.
Yeah, so that is where
better, but not really.
Not great. I don't know. I feel like it should be less expensive and looks more comfortable to write on, but again, I don't know the price point, so
I'd say it does look a little bit more practical compared to the other one. Especially at least because, like, yes, the screen's, like you were saying, the screen's still like only a couple inches like thick, but at least it's like the length of the entire thing. So, like you said, you might be able to get a sentence or two on there.
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about that anymore. I just wanted to bring that up because it was just funny that it popped up on an advertisement again, just like the regular Free Ride did. And I was like, oh, there's a new one of these things.
They're always listening.
They're always fucking listening. I asked a question in the Classic Lit Book Club today.
Saw that.
So I'm going to read this because I would like your opinion on it. I asked Ashley's opinion on it, and he was in agreement. And most of the comments on here, if not all of them, agreed with me as well.
That's a first.
Yeah, it is. But I don't think I asked this in like a douchey way. So I wrote as follows. I follow a basketball page and it has me pondering something in regards to literature. You see, one of the major arguments about comparing different eras in sports is the evolution of said sports. For instance, you can't fairly compare modern basketball players to players from the 50s because the sport has evolved so much since then. This evolution coincides with most things in society: medicine, cinema, technology, education. We've improved in most things, but I feel we've actually devolved in regards to literature, and I do believe this, Spencer. Last night I reread some of my favorite Edgar Allan Poe stories, and one thing that struck me most was how far we've strayed from a full utilization of the English language. I suspect this applies to many other languages as well, because why would it only be English, you know? Poe, Twain, Joyce, Fitzgerald, Hemingway all had unique writing styles and utilized language in very particular ways. But contemporary fiction, at least in the works I have read, lacks that uniqueness to a degree. There will always be outliers, such as David Foster Wallace, who challenged readers, but I don't feel modern fiction in general focuses on the art of writing. Language isn't stressed or made to be challenging these days. Instead, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, the focus has shifted to the stories being told. Like I said, I feel literature hasn't evolved like other aspects of our lives. If you use the basketball argument of the modern athlete beating those from the past, you'd be saying modern writers are better than those classic authors we adore so much. I can't in good conscience say that's true. Perhaps I'm just being a literary snob, though. I'd love to hear some of your opinions on the matter. And please, if you know modern writers who you feel are worthy of comparing to the greats of yesteryear, ones who aren't older than the hills like Cormac McCarthy, let me know. I'm always looking for new incredible authors to read. So what do you think there, Spencer?
Whenever I saw that earlier,
and again, this is only for like the language and the writing style. This doesn't have actually anything to do with the story.
Yeah.
Because storytelling, I think, has actually evolved.
Yeah. I pretty much agree with that. That's pretty a sound statement. And but the only thing that I would say come from a different angle is and like how you mentioned with the storytelling, they're more focused on storytelling other than maybe the language, like you were saying.
Right. Well, the language is just being the art form of writing itself. Like you think of like a Ulysses, or like I said, the Poe's vocabulary and the way he said things was so unique. You read Lovecraft, so you'd know like Lovecraft is very similar.
But then I also feel like a lot of those things are just like difficult reads.
Yeah,
like sometimes that doesn't help. Like,
but is it only Are they only difficult reads because we didn't grow up reading that style?
I mean, yeah.
Because people used to learn Latin in school, so reading Latin and things like that was not a challenge. But now if somebody brings you something that's in Latin, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Because, I feel like you were saying, like, there's not probably that many people who have such a unique voice, but I think where the uniqueness is in
the storytelling.
I don't know how much that vocabulary, like, is maybe needed. I don't know. I think like everything else, it's always in like the what are you trying to tell? What kind of story are you trying to tell?
Well, somebody brought up a very good point. Through the lens of time, things do change. So we're viewing those great writers like the ones I mentioned and many more through the lens of time. Like, yeah, they're great writers because they're the ones whose work was so good it went through. There was a lot of awful pulpy writers in the early 20s that like, the 1920s that you never heard of. Then I'm sure when
there's probably really good ones that nobody's never heard of.
True. But like you think like even Poe's era, there in the 1800s, there was probably a lot of writers that just never made it through because they weren't good enough or their work just didn't stand the test of time. So we only get the sample size of the best. So I said about contemporary writers not being that unique, but 100 years from now, the ones that are still being read probably would be the ones that are considered unique. So for future people, they'd probably be like, oh, why can't they write like they did in the 21st century?
Why is nobody writing like Stephen King anymore?
So, there's that caveat. It's just, I think it's an interesting topic.
It's a weird thing to compare.
Right.
Because like you brought up in your post of like the basketball or any sports.
You can't really
analogy.
Compare modern to something so long ago.
Well, even that too, but even though like, because we're just even like with the sports, there's like a physical aspect. There's a thing that you're doing. Like writing, everybody's sitting in their own corner. I don't know. It's like, I feel like comparing writers is a more difficult thing to do other than comparing different athletes to time periods.
Well, I was going for more of the art side of it, though. So if you think of people who are creating what we consider literature now, I mean, I can't really name anyone because I don't read contemporary literature. I just never found anything that I've read that was really engaging or well done. I mean, obviously the average reader, even back in the day when it came out, is not really enjoying Ulysses probably because that's like, postmodern art. Only a select group of people are really going to enjoy that kind of stuff. But that's still art. I feel like that's not really created often now. Maybe you can think of like a House of Leaves would fall into that category. That's experimental. That's something different.
But like, though, with that example, I just remember you and Ashley just talking about how terrible it was. Like, so what's the point of that then? I mean, I guess, you want to take your shot, and if you miss, you miss, but...
Well... Again, though, House of Leaves is one of those things 100 years from now might stand the test of time that people will still be talking about that book versus...
Well, will it stand the test of time because, this was a great, good read, or was like, do you remember that fucking weird-ass book from like 100 years ago that nobody understood? You had to fucking turn it upside down and shit, read it backwards.
Well, see, Spencer, you kind of... are the mouthpiece for the general public now. Is you just want the good read.
Yeah.
You don't care about the art style necessarily in it. You would rather have something be easier to read but has a good story than something that you don't even necessarily know what the story is because it's so convoluted, stream of consciousness, all that kind of stuff. And I do agree to a point, but I like more challenging works as well. I think there's room for both.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
But I do feel like
for my my personal like reading time, I want to enjoy something that I'm reading. Not saying that I don't want to try some things, but like I said, like I know, especially like sometimes my reading time is so precious or whatever. I want to spend it on something that I enjoy reading, that I like reading, not something that I get 2 pages and I'm like fucked. I get frustrated and my mind melts, and then I don't read anything for 3 days.
That's understandable. Different strokes for different folks.
I mean, that probably has something to do with me being more on the dum-dum side than on the...
Well, can we at least agree on the fact that I don't think it would hurt if modern writers at least spiced up their writing a little bit?
Oh, definitely.
So things weren't so uniform. Because that's where we come into the major problem is when we review books on here, well, we generally don't review... I don't know if we've ever actually just reviewed like random books too often, but like if we just got a sample size of best-selling novels and we started reviewing them on here, whatever current bestsellers, I would have a feeling that we would just kind of be talking about the story and giving the synopsis and stuff, but we wouldn't be able to really go into the writing and deep dive into it because it's surface level, you know?
Well, it's like James Patterson.
Yeah.
It's a good example of that. It's very, from what I can gather, and I never read any of his stuff, from what I can gather, it's very straightforward, kind of to the point. There's not much to it. Like,
and I'm not saying it has to be very convoluted or complex. Like, you can think of like a Haruki Murakami. I mean, his metaphor usage and his allegories and stuff may be a little more complex at times, but reading him is not a challenge.
No.
I don't feel. Or even like a Neil Gaiman. It's such easy reading.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like there is a little bit of an art form there. He wouldn't be what you consider a literary guy, but he's like, he could be on the border if his subject matter was deeper, maybe. Or like you read Neverwhere, I'm sure that could probably constitute like something to be more literary because of the subject matter.
He's one of those guys I could see down the line.
If he wanted to, could.
Or, like in the future, people will look back and consider him. But like I just always I bump up against like you mentioned like the James Joyce's, and it's like he writes in a way like
you can't understand.
You can't you know what I mean? It's just like, okay, I get it.
He's writing things that need to be studied in universities.
Yeah.
I just think that, and you're gonna probably laugh at me for saying this, I think we need more Alan Moore Jerusalems in the world.
Yeah.
Because that's a good counter for the basic novel, like just the basic general novel that comes out every year, might be enjoyed, might be a bestseller, but it's forgotten in a couple years. I mean, think of how many Stephen King novels you've read that aren't like The Shining. You know? They're just all right. There's middling novels. Like we read the Kurt Vonnegut Sirens of Titan. That's not one that 5 years from now we're going to be like, yeah, that was a really good book. Like you talk about it and like you're probably not going to remember it, honestly. And it's okay, like, because he wrote Slaughterhouse-5. Like not every author needs to have, crazy hit after hit or anything, but I just think that if you're an author, and once you get to a certain point in your repertoire, you might just want to bust out a quick fucking Jerusalem. Something like experimental.
A quick Jerusalem.
Some 1,000-page tome that's probably not going to get read by a lot of people, and people are going to think, like, one of those ones that's just be a challenge and nobody's going to enjoy. But you know what? It was different. And that's like something I think is important.
Now, you bring up Vonnegut because I think he's interesting in this topic because, like, granted, he doesn't... Not like not necessarily the words that he uses are like crazy difficult, other than when he's going into his his weird stuff. But like
the subject matter, I
feel like the way he almost like a Hemingway, the way he writes, because like
it's more of reading it as a whole versus like a Ulysses, where each passage could be something to deep dive into.
Yeah,
Vonnegut's work seems to be like we talk about the messages of free will and like the themes of free will and stuff. His is the kind of work you have to deep dive the whole thing. Like you have to step back and see the whole picture, and then it's like marvelous. Versus, and same with Hemingway. Versus like any of James Joyce's stuff, it's usually like or David Foster Wallace or any of those like experimental postmodernists. You have to look into the work, and it's like, this one paragraph has so much to break down, and then that's when you get kind of bogged down, and people don't enjoy the book as much.
Because I think Hemingway is also an interesting one because again, like he's very succinct and to the point. But the words that he's using and how he's using them to tell that story
they're very purposeful.
Yeah. that's why I think he's interesting compared to, like I said, like, you know, like the Joyces, where like it can be a bit of a slog or a chore to read.
Well, that's why Hemingway was really the first to popularize that style that so many authors have mimicked over the years, that we're to the point now where I think everyone thinks that they just kind of write a Hemingway style, and it's probably just because they're not that great of a writer, honestly. Because if, like we've explained many times on here, his work seems so simple until you actually study it. Like when you try to, you can read it at surface level and you get the story, but if you break it down and really think deep on his work, it's always like so much more than you really realize. So that's just like the very interesting thing. But I don't want this cold open to go on for another 20 minutes.
You know, when I saw this post, I was like, that could be just an episode.
Yeah, maybe we could revisit that sometime. I do like the topic, but I would like to actually come up with an example, because people did give me examples in the comments of like modern writers who do have more flirt. Because I'm not very well read when it comes to contemporary fiction. I'll be honest, like I don't read a lot of contemporary writers.
See, I've been trying to read some newer fiction, but it's more on the line.
We read a few every year, but yeah.
it's not literature. It's not on the literature side. It's more on...
It's just every time I read like something that's like won the Pulitzer Prize or something, it's always like not that. I just don't really care for it. It's boring usually, and it's boring, but not written in a way that I find engaging or interesting.
Well, I feel like that stuff is almost kind of like, it's like Oscar baits for like, you know, I'm gonna write this story in
most
this way.
Most of those movies are so boring, nobody cares.
Yeah. But, you know, so you can do that same with your novel. You know, you're just putting things in there that you want to try to, that might win you something, or get you acclaim or whatever. Right.
Maybe this will be next week's. We'll do a whole topic, a whole episode on this, and I'll look up some things, because I would like to use some Poe as examples, because I did read all my favorite Poe stories last night, because they're very quick reads, but my reading level has gone up now that when I went back, I was like, oh, this is like easy now, which is weird because I used to find Poe challenging.
Yeah.
But now because fucking thank you, Tolkien, Silmarillion, and like, David Foster Wallace. You guys, think about this. We'll end on this analogy here. You climb a mountain, right? Now, if you're only climbing small mountains, when you try to climb the big one, it's going to be hard. But when you climb the big one and then go back to the small ones are easy.
Yeah.
Maybe running would be a better example. If you only practice to run 5 miles, like a 5-mile marathon, you might get good at running 5 miles, but if you did a 10, you'd be fucking dead.
Yeah.
But if you fucking work on running 10 miles and then do a 5-mile marathon, easy. That's what it's like going back to some of these work after reading these monstrosities that I've been reading lately. But anyway, folks, we have an episode about banned books, and this one might get controversial, so that's why I kind of want this cold open to be a little longer, because people might not like what we're going to be discussing here, because I got 2 separate lists. But I'll bring it up in the intro. So if you don't like the discussion of we're going to try to stay out of any politics or anything, but it's like a lot of LGBTQ stuff and a lot of sexualization and things like that. So if you're not into that, I would completely understand you not listening to the rest of the episode, but we're going to try to keep it somewhat PG and keep our opinions out of it to a degree. So anyway, space music. You are listening to the Drunken Pen Writing, what is it? Podcast. And I would like to give a special shout out today, Spencer.
Ooh, who we shouting out?
We have a lot of listeners in Germany, specifically in Baden-Württemberg.
Nice.
Which is, I think, southwestern Germany, maybe, or southeast Germany, east. I think it's west. They have the Black Forest. I looked it up. Because I'd never heard of it, and it looks beautiful. And I'm like, holy shit. But we got a significant amount of downloads in the last month from all of Germany, but that general region got the most. So
no, what was the name of that place?
Baden-Württemberg. I hope I pronounced that correctly. My name, because I am the host and I am the guy who has to pronounce things like Baden-Württemberg. What is my name? Caleb James. Ooh, I have to tell you off air, by the way, we might have a sponsor for the actual sponsor for the show. So, but I don't want to jinx us, so I'll tell you off air. Remind me at the end of this. The guy I'm talking to, because you folks definitely don't know, is Spencer the... What are you? Spencer, the Rhino Wrestler Church.
Nice.
I was going to make you the Phoenix something or other, but I decided against it because the P and then it'd be F words, and I just decided Reno was better. So you're the Reno Rhino wrestler. I almost said Rio Rhino wrestler, which changes it up because now you're down South America style.
Yeah.
Today's episode is a controversial one, so we'll hop right into it. We're going to be talking about banned books. I have 2 separate lists here I'm going to go off of. The first one is the top 10 banned books just currently in the United States. The second one is just of all time. So those would be the classics and stuff like that. And I'm going to kind of go over the reasons for these bannings and stuff. But I will say off of Jump Street, I am very anti-censorship and don't believe books should be banned regardless of the topics. But with a big caveat here, which when I looked up some of these books in this list, I actually do agree that I do not believe children should be reading some of these books, or if they are, it should be with the parents' guidance there, and I don't think they should be in schools. But I will.
Well, at least, we'll wait till we get into it because I don't know about any of these books off. I haven't had a chance to.
Right. Well, this first article is off Esquire, so this is a real legit place. Does Esquire still have a magazine, or is it just
probably not?
They had some great fiction from what I remember back in the day, I believe.
There's probably like $15 a magazine or something, probably.
Yeah. I'm not going to read this gigantic intro. I'm just going to get into the list. So the very first one on this list is Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name at all correctly. Maya, Kobabe. I'm going to say Kobabe. But it's Genderqueer, and I do remember kind of hearing this on the news.
The title sounds familiar.
And I think most of these books probably end up getting like banned in Texas, so in Texas schools. In this beautifully illustrated memoir, Kobabe, who uses E, M, and air pronouns, charts air journey of self-discovery from adolescence to adulthood. And I'm going to have to feign ignorance on this. I don't know what the air pronouns are.
I was just going to ask you what that was.
Like the letter E, and then EM, and then EIR. Is it just like, the, them, there, but cut off the TH? I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. Along the way, Kobabe navigates confusing questions about sexuality and gender identity, then ultimately comes out as gender non-binary. E faces familiar teenage problems like the agony of crushes and dating, along with confusing challenges like menstruating as a non-binary individual. And then it goes on here. But here's why it was it's banned.
Gay.
It's considered the most challenged book in the country right now, and I think Canada is having a big problem with this book. It has a candid discussion of gender fluidity as downright pornographic, according to some folks. They think it's pornographic. I have no problem with like genderqueer explanations in stories or books for kids or anything like that. Like, they should, especially nowadays, they have to know kind of how to navigate the world they're going into, whether they're actually consider themselves queer or not. But here's the problem with the book, because this one's illustrated, so it's cartoons, right? When I looked it up, a lot of the pictures, there was like overtly sexually graphic depictions. Like there was one of, I think it was a boy and a trans person wearing a dildo, and he was giving it a blowjob. I think maybe there was another one where someone was grabbing someone's crotch, and just like openly sexual activities going on in this book. And that I could completely understand. Like, why is that in a school?
Yeah.
Like, okay, if the parents allow their kids to read this, I would recommend reading it with them so they know what they're engaging in. But even so, I personally don't think young children need to see. And I grew up like fucking. I remember stumbling into my uncle's Playboys when I was like 5. You know, I seen my first pornography when I was like 6 or something. That was back when you had to get VHSs. Like kids are probably seeing porn regardless of how well their parents are, trying to keep it away from. They're probably seeing it, all the time from different places, which kind of sucks because it probably gives you a warped sexual, like what they have now.
Oh, yeah.
Versus us watching Cinemax with the blurry screen and see a nipple. Like, it's a lot different now. But as far as books aimed at kids, and some people say this is kind of like a grooming book, I could see both sides of the argument of why kids should be allowed to maybe not necessarily like read this book, but like the messaging in the book. But at the same time, it is graphic, and I don't think it should be aimed towards children.
Well, and just from a legal aspect, I can see why schools wouldn't want to have this. And because at first I thought if it was just a like a prose thing, and he was just you were just reading him talking about things.
Yeah, but it actually shows the pictures, and there's no blurs, there's no bars. It's just graphic. They show and this is kind of what confuses me because our school that we went to, public school, just sucked, inner city school. It like I remember having sex ed when I was in like 4th grade, 5th grade. I don't even remember what grade it was, but I don't remember like it being good. I don't remember really anything they talked about, and I don't remember if they showed pictures of anything or just.
Well, there was a couple. Like there was like sex ed in like middle school, and then those were sex ed in high school too.
Yeah,
which were just like a part of health class.
So
but that was like a week.
Yeah, but so I don't know, because having not read the book, I don't know if this kind of falls in line with that. So maybe what they show in sex ed classes now is similar to what this book shows. I don't know. I can't say. If that's the case, then maybe this book should be...
I never even thought about what sex ed would be like nowadays. Oh my God.
Right? So
you need like a whole, like, you need just a whole
diagrams
day.
And
a whole day just to get into that stuff.
Well, I also get the aspect of, like, it's weird because the way we view sex in this country has always been very prudish, but you can't, like, one class, like, because I remember sex ed, it wasn't like something we took, like, as a semester or something. It was just, like, one class randomly or some shit. Like, that's not enough to teach kids anything.
No.
Sex ed definitely needs better. And teach, whether you like it or not, kids do need to learn about sex, and they need to, I still think it should be on the parents to teach them.
Should be a little bit of both. A little bit of both.
In school could teach you the sterilized, normal, proper.
Because I mean,
fucking Mormon way of doing things or something. I mean,
because like, look at some of the kids, and then look at them parents.
Yeah,
they should maybe not be telling them. Like, or
honestly,
like,
a lot of parents need to go to sex ed,
right? So I could see where like the parents, go over. Like, yes, this is sex, this is what you gotta do, protection. But, like, then schools go in maybe a bit more of a detail or, like, how to go, that stuff where, like, things you may not want to talk to your parents about, but you can talk to this one teacher you see once every couple years that that you don't have to worry about the hang-up of.
Well, for the people, and we'll end on this book with this one. For the people who think that like this book is just completely acceptable and kids should be able to read it and stuff, even if it shows some depictions of sexual nature, I like to say, like, think of it like this. What if you just showed what used to be considered just the normal male and female having sex in, drawing form? Like you see penis and vagina or penis and mouth or whatever, but it's just male and female. Do you find that still acceptable for the kids to read? Because like I said, it was like a strap on the one that was wearing in the picture I saw, so it wasn't like an actual penis, but it looked like a fucking penis. So, like, if you think it's just like, it's the LGBTQ stuff is getting censored and that's all it is, and people were just bigots, well, I feel like those same people would feel the same if it was straight people having, like, because I'm not a conservative by any nature, but I do feel like if the conservatives saw straight people having sex in a kid's book, it would feel just as outraged.
Yeah.
I don't think this is one of those cases where it's actually the LGBTQ stuff necessarily.
It's just like sex in general.
It's just sex in general, which I don't think sex should be in like kids' books, kids' shows, things like that, because they're kids. They shouldn't have to worry about that just yet. Maybe when they're teenagers, and maybe this book is aimed more towards teenagers, but it's a picture book. So,
well, that's what I was gonna say. That we're probably gonna have to dive. We're probably gonna dive in more as this list goes through. Is like the different. Like, are we talking kids like middle school or like high school? Like
the art and everything that I saw made it look like this was a book like 5-year-olds.
Man, that's weird.
Like I'll show it to you when we're off air. Like it looked like actual like a children's book. So if that's true, then I'm not really cool with that. But we have to move on. We're going to be here all day. So the next one is Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison.
Is that like the sequel to Fuck Boys or something?
I don't know. Let's find out. Lawn Boy is the big-hearted story of Mike Munoz, a young Chicanos driver working on a landscaping crew in Washington. As Mike fights against the soul-crushing forces of classism and racism to achieve his American dream, he also comes to terms with his sexual identity. Though the novel was written for an adult audience, teens fell in love with Lawn Boy, leading it to be awarded an Alex Prize, an award bestowed by the Young Adult Literary Service Association to books written for adults that resonate with teens. I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Critics slammed the book for LGBTQ content and sexually explicit materials, pointing to a sexual encounter between two young men. So I'll just end it there. I don't think that book should be banned at all.
No, that doesn't.
Because that book was written for adults. That's stupid. Like, and it didn't say, well, I didn't read the intro here, but it didn't state explicitly that these are just banned in schools. It just said banned books, like from libraries and stuff. People were boycotting them. Because you can still buy all these books. They have the
Yeah.
Amazon links on this list. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes if I remember. Subject matter aside, like any school library, if that's where we're going, like, do they have adult books in those libraries? Like anything, even the classics that might depict any kind of sexual nature or violence. That's another one. A lot of people ban these kind of books, but then they don't ban books where people are getting heads chopped off and stuff. So, come on.
And again, that seems like that would be like a good book to tackle in like an advanced like English class, like senior year or something like that, you know?
And, well, I'm sure most of these are probably, it's like they said, teenagers, so it's probably high school that these are banned, and I don't think that's fair. It's a prose novel, so there's no pictures. If there's no pictures, I don't find it bad that kids would be reading about this, unless it was very gratuitous sex scenes like erotica, which this doesn't sound like it is. I don't think there's a problem with kids reading that stuff because they're watching way worse on their phones all the time.
Probably at school.
Just look at any fucking rap video anymore.
Oh my god.
That's way more graphic than what's probably depicted in this book, I'd imagine. Next up, All Boys Aren't Blue. I'm seeing this is by
theme?
George M. Johnson. Yeah, I'm seeing a consistent theme here. Johnson's effervescent, unapologetic memoir manifesto chronicles the joys and challenges of growing up black and queer. Johnson lays bare the darkest moments of their young life, from the bullying they suffered to their molestation by a family member, while also remembering moments of arresting beauty, from flea marketing with their grandmother to experiencing young love. All Boys Aren't Blue has been targeted for LGBTQ content, profanity, and once again, sexually explicit material. And this one's a big problem in Florida, apparently. School boards were, not just banning it, but they wanted to boycott, burn the book, whatever. One, I just want to say that's an awesome name.
Yeah.
With the subject matter, All Boys Aren't Blue, like that's a cool name.
Yeah.
Because not all boys have to wear blue, and also, is that because they're sad? Like, that I don't think that should be banned. Again, unless there's like explicit erotica content, it just sounds like they're banning that one because it has queer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's come on, it's 2022. Do we have to ban stuff just because it deals with racial identity and again, sexual identity?
And again, it's like, okay, yeah, you might not want to have it like in the middle schools, but like in the high schools, like by that time already, people are already into there.
Well, let's just state this once and for all. Anything out under the age of, I would say, 14, 15, probably shouldn't have real adult themes in the work. Because, kids do mature at different levels. They see different things at different levels. They experience things at different levels. Like, every person's different. But I think across the board, we could say, like, no sex in books aimed at children, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Once they're teenagers and they're going through puberty, they're going to have questions. They're going to want to experience things. You can start easing them into it, I think. Just don't be explicit. Next up, Out of Darkness by Ashley Hope Perez. This gripping work of historical fiction set in an East Texas oil town during the 1930s chronicles the teenage romance between Naomi, a Mexican-American girl, and Wash, a black boy. Ooh. Racism and classism divide these young lovers until the novel culminates with an all-too-real disaster, one of the worst in American educational history. I think that actually sounds excellent. Like that sounds like that'd be a really hard-hitting book, because imagine a Mexican-American girl and a black boy in the 1930s falling in love. God. That's a gripping story I would want to read.
Because like back then, they didn't like either one of them. Nobody like, you know what I mean? As generalities, like, you know what I mean? Both of them are getting it just for what they are, separate, and then when they come together.
Mm-hmm. And this book was banned not because of race, or not because of like the racial stuff. It was banned because it's apparently sexually explicit, and it has been widely challenged for its depictions of abuse. So I think that would be an important book. Those are people's real experiences. I feel like they should be shared. If you want your kid reading them, that should be a personal level. Like, that's like a personal choice. Like, if you don't want your kid reading that, they'll probably make them want to read it more. But like, maybe not necessarily at a school library, but maybe these books should have a special place in the school library where it's like, hey, you have to have a parent or guardian allow you to check these books out.
Like, you need like a permission slip or something.
Yeah. And honestly, I'd be just stoked if I was a fucking teacher, librarian, parent, whatever, that the kids even wanted to read a book.
Right?
Any book.
I don't care what's in it, just read it.
Next,
as long as it's not like Mein Kampf or something like that.
Yeah. Next up, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas.
That one sounds familiar too.
In the 5 years since its publication, Thomas' debut novel has become a downright phenomenon. Honored with the prestigious Coretta Scott King Book Award, that's probably why you know it. It captured the imagination of a generation and later became a feature film.
That's probably why I know it.
The Hate U Give is the searing story of 16-year-old Star Carter, who finds her footing as an activist when her unarmed friend is murdered by a police officer. Critics have slammed the book for profanity, violence, and supposed anti-police agenda. Well, I tell those people to fuck off.
Right? Like, I mean, that
That's
sounds
a
like
real experience. Again,
that
real
sounds like something
experiences.
that needs to be taught in school. So, especially depending on the area, but like, hey, yes, there's a good chance just because of whatever your skin color or orientation is, like, where you live, they might come after you because of that. And
well,
you
let's
have
be
to
honest.
be on guard about that.
Let's be honest. There's a subsect of Americans who don't want people to discuss that kind of thing. And we kind of know who those people are. They're racist assholes. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. That's a weird cover. It's cowboy and Indian toys from like the 50s.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure this will be about racism. Published in 2007, this National Book Award-winning young adult novel is an enduring classic in middle school classrooms. Drawn from Alexie's own experiences, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is the story of Junior, a teenage cartoonist growing up in the Spokane Indian Reservation. Junior attends school in a nearby farm town where the only other native student is the school mascot. On the res, Junior is considered a traitor, but he doesn't fit in at his gleaming all-white school either. This novel has been challenged repeatedly, with detractors citing profanity, sexual references, and the use of a derogatory term. I'm gonna say, I don't know, what would the derogatory term be?
For Indians?
I'm assuming that's what it is. I would guess like savages, maybe.
Or the formerly known as the Washington Commanders?
Yeah, maybe. That's the only thing I could think of. But why would white people? I feel like why would they want to ban it for an anti-Indian stereotype or anti-Indian? Well, also the fact that it's named that and it's about Native Americans.
Well, and also too, they just probably don't want people to be like, oh, we never called them that.
Yeah, or maybe Indians, the slur.
No, that's true. Yeah,
I didn't even think of that, because when I first read that, I was wondering. I was like, it's the part that I was thinking actual Indians. I wasn't thinking Native Americans when I read the title, but I was like, yeah, it makes more sense with the cowboy and Indian on the thing. I don't think that book should be banned. Next up, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews. Awkward teenager Greg Gaines plans to make it through high school by keeping a low profile and making mediocre movies with his best friend Earl. But everything changes when his mother forces him to befriend Rachel, a classmate with leukemia. I don't know why I said that so cheerfully.
Leukemia!
Sorry, I just got a little lost there, and I just read it really excitedly. That should read, when his mother forces him to befriend Rachel, a classmate with leukemia.
There you go.
Sorry. As Greg makes a movie about Rachel's life and traces her deteriorating health, a word I can't say right, he's forced to reconsider the wisdom of living on the sidelines. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl is a gutting, unflinching novel. Okay, so why is this book, apparently it's pornographic.
What?
And Andrews tweeted, I guarantee you no one has ever been or will ever be sexually aroused by this book. So I'm assuming it probably discusses the body of the dying girl. Maybe, the cancer is ravaged her body or something.
Did they say how old the kids were?
Teenagers, I think.
So maybe there's
high school.
Maybe there's like a sex scene or maybe
I don't know, but I don't think anything about cancer is sexy. So
no, that seems like something that should definitely be like, that should be like an assignment book, to read, and then you discuss it in class. Like, I don't know. That seems like something that should be read in class.
Right. Next up, and this might be the last one, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This is the most prestigious writer on this list so far. Morrison's visionary first novel is the painful and poignant story of Pecola Breedlove, an abused and unloved black girl pregnant by her own father who suffers relentless oppression and cruelty in a rural Ohio town. Pecola wishes desperately for blue eyes, convinced that conventional white beauty is the ticket to a better life, but soon finds her mind colonized to the brink of madness. So this came out in the 70s. This put Morrison on the map. So this is banned for offensive language, sexually explicit material, probably the racism stuff. That's a tough one because I could understand, because I know her writing, I can see that it would maybe be too much for high school kids. Might be a little too extreme. Again, it goes to the maturity level, who would be reading this book. Because even just think of incest alone is that's a tough sell to have high school kids read that. But again, I always look at it, this is how I look at fiction too. So you have kids reading that book, right? Maybe a lot of kids who are reading that have no experience with any of that kind of stuff. So they're just like, oh, this is fucking messed up or something. But there's probably going to be like at least one kid in the school who reads that book and goes, oh, I'm like going through that.
Yeah, that connects with it.
Yeah, that's like a real thing. And maybe that actually helps them through that trauma. I don't know why people overlook that. They put this fucking generalization on fiction where it's like, oh, everyone should feel the same about this. No. It hits everyone different. So a book like that could be very impactful and save somebody's life. Versus maybe another kid who just thinks it's gross and is like, oh, look, there's sex and tits in here.
I mean, and like the subject matter is a little bit different, but like I just know from like music and like, you know, I've said before especially when I was younger, I was a super hardcore like ICP fan, and people always were saying shit about them, man. But I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that they have saved many people's lives with their music and just with the stuff that they do, and just, you know, how they just made, you know, people, a whole bunch of kids that never felt like they belonged to anything, belonged to something, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So like that is like a real thing, like.
But outsiders are just like, oh, they're talking about murdering people and, you know, going crazy or doing drugs, and that like that's all they see. They don't understand. There's like a community behind it.
You're right. Yeah. So. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like there's some things like that are like, yes, tough, but could really help, like, you know, the students or even the adults that are reading, you know.
I think it's also important to remember that kids aren't these fucking dumb animals that people like to pretend they are.
Especially now.
Yeah, especially now. But at all time, kids were always treated like they were stupid. Like, until you hit 18 and you magically become, you know, get some smarts knocked into you, you don't know anything, and you shouldn't have, like, your feelings don't matter, and, you know, just do what you're told, and then you'll get a job eventually. Like, that's stupid. That's not how fucking life works.
That's why I always, like, with my friends' kids, like, I mean, I'll goof around and play with them too, but, like, I also try to talk to them as, like, they're
people. Like,
as people. Like, I mean, even whenever, like, when they were young, I would get down, like, you know, I would squat down and, like, take a knee, and I, like, sometimes I would, like, talk to them, like, to their face, like, you know what I mean?
And don't be afraid to use language and vocabulary that they might not understand, because that's how they learn to understand it. I hate when people do baby talk.
That's how I learned. I can't tell you how much I learned things from just, like, watching, like, a show or something where, like, I didn't know, but, like, after the couple times of watching it, or then being like, oh, hey, what's that mean? And then some, oh, well, that's another word for this or for that, like.
Treat your kids like you'd want people to treat you.
Yeah.
Like how you'd want people to talk to you. That's how you should talk to your kids. Like, you don't have to baby them. And if they don't understand, explain it. But a lot of people don't have the patience for that, I find. Like, you know, when kids go through the why stage and ask why for everything, a lot of parents get really mad. It's like, the sky's blue because it is. Like, they just don't want to answer it. Fucking, I mean, and I can say this as somebody who's not going to ever have kids.
Yeah.
I would answer the questions as best I could, as much as I could. But I'm a very patient person as well. But I could see people get annoyed. You worked all day. You're fucking tired. And your kid just won't shut the fuck up. I get it. But then you give them a book.
I always just like to throw the because. Just right back at him. Why? Because. Why? Because.
You know what I would do? Because I think this is a good way to teach kids to learn on their own. I would say, why is the sky blue? Why do you think it's blue?
Yeah.
You throw it back at them in a way that's not condescending, and then let them come up with an answer, and then maybe you can explain it to them, or you'd be like, well, you know what? That sounds like it could be right, but how about, and you find something that they could look it up and actually, and maybe if it's like reading something, they would have to be older, but you can find YouTube videos that they can watch, things like that. Like, it's a good way to teach kids without treating them like they're stupid. And you don't have to necessarily, because if they ask one question and it's something like that, and then you send them on an expedition to find the answer, it's a little adventure for them, and it gets it out of their hair. They're not going to ask you any more questions for a minute.
Right.
There actually are a couple more on this list. This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. Do you know why this book is banned?
I could imagine.
Dawson's warm and wise instruction manual for growing up LGBTQ covers a vast range of topics, from coming out to flirting to the ins and outs of gay sex. Candid and uncensored, it's an edifying, informative work packed with voices from across the gender and sexual spectrums. I would like to look this one up. If this is a picture book, maybe not. This seems like actually it's aimed towards teenagers. It doesn't say if this is a prose novel. I'm assuming this is a prose novel, so I don't. That's a tricky one, because if it's very explicit, like in what it's describing, but it's if it's done in a way that's like supposed to be educational, like what do you do with that?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, again, maybe that one should be left up to the parents and kids to discuss on their own. And if you're a parent too, even if your kid's a teenager, you can not edit the book, but maybe you read it first and then just kind of dictate it to them, break it down to them in a way that leaves out some of the more detailed bits. And then when they're older, you can let them read it.
And I don't think we mentioned this yet with especially some of these books that we do think that maybe not allowed in schools, but should also be allowed in general, though.
Yeah.
Like you might not.
I don't think any book should be, banned in general.
Like this book is gay, or even that the graphic picture book. Like, yeah, you might not want to have that in school. Again, just because we were saying about just like, you just want to cover your bases and be safe as a school. But like, they should be able to go online and order it off of Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever.
Exactly. There's very few works I could think of that should be just banned outright. And I'm not thinking of anything that exists that I know of. I'm just talking about like things people could create that should be banned. And that would be anything that could incite extreme violence and that's subjective though. Because like, if you even think of like Mein Kampf you said earlier, like, I don't think Mein Kampf should be should be, banned. From what I understand, it was a terrible book.
Yeah.
But it is possible that book, somebody who's already leaning into that kind of stuff, might send them over the edge and do a crazy rampage or something. But they're probably going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a reason to ban a book just because, like, that goes with, like, Catcher in the Rye and stuff. Oh, you shoot Reagan or, not Reagan, John Lennon.
Yeah.
Shot John Lennon because of Catcher in the Rye. Like, it's just because some person's fucking crazy. If we did that to all art, then there wouldn't have any art.
It would have been like, oh, the son of Sam. Should we just murder all dogs now?
Yeah.
Because his dog told him to do it?
Stupid. Like, things I consider that should maybe, like, actually be banned is something that would, like, actually depict, like, gross, full-on, like, child pornography or something like that. Like, something that's overly graphic and it's not just trying to, like, kill taboos or something. Like, something that's clearly made for a certain audience that's already engaging in illegal activities.
It's kind of like that old saying, like, what is porn? I might not be able to tell you, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of times with like the banned things, like I don't know if I could tell you what could be banned, but I would, if I saw it, I could tell you like that maybe should not be able to go out.
Yeah, like snuff films. Like, like real live snuff films, like somebody getting murdered or something. Next up, and this is the final one, number 10. I forgot these are numbered, so I could have just looked. Beyond Magenta by Susan Cucklin. Beautifully written and photographed by Cucklin, Beyond Magenta profiles 6 transgendered and gender-neutral teens in their own words. Each profile tells a nuanced personal tale of self-discovery, coming out and navigating the struggles and triumphs that follow. So why? It's because about mental health and a lot of things. This one seems to be one that just parents don't seem to understand.
Parents, they just don't understand.
Maybe some of the personal stories in here are sexually explicit, but it doesn't seem like this would be. Again, you know what? When we get off air, we'll look up some of these just to see, like, if we can see the insides of the books, to see what we're actually discussing here. But just at face value, that doesn't seem like that should be really offensive, other than people might be bigots or, I don't know, like, homeschool your kids if you don't want them to be engaged with, like, any kind of people that are different than your beliefs. And since we're fucking really pushing time here, I'm just gonna read these ones very quickly. This is the next top 10 list. This is
probably more known.
Yeah, this is the one we don't actually have to break down. Top 10 most famous banned books of all time, Spencer. And I just kind of found a list that seemed to be like the top 10 seems to be pretty steady in all these lists. So I think this was the best one.
And before we get into that, I would just like to say, if I ever get around to actually ever putting out anything, please ban it.
Please, everybody buy it.
Please.
Do you have a guess as to what the number one banned book of all time is?
Number one? Oh.
And I'm assuming this is probably leaning more towards just like the U.S., but I think this one would actually be for the world. Whereas the last one I think is just U.S.
I can think of a couple of things, but I don't know what could be number one.
Just make a guess.
I was thinking something like Catcher in the Rye.
There it is.
Is it?
Number one is Catcher in the Rye. Most banned book of all time, apparently. We don't need to go. I just told you about John Lennon getting shot.
Didn't you do some drunken, inebriated?
We did a drunken, inebriated reading challenge on Catcher in the Rye, and we discuss the phony who wrote that book,
So,
J.D. Salinger.
so you can go and dig in those issues
Yeah.
if you want, or those episodes if you want to find Caleb and Ash's opinions on
Yeah.
that book.
I didn't like it too much. Number 2, A Clockwork Orange. I can understand why that book would be banned back when it was written.
I want to read that.
Oh, man.
Is it hard?
Burgess created his own slang language.
Oh, yeah, I did hear that.
Which is throughout the whole book. And it does have the definitions in the end, so you can go and... Once you learn them, it's not bad, but it takes you probably half the book, honestly, to really understand what the fuck they're saying. I really liked it. I thought it was an excellent book. I'll let you borrow it sometime. I have it.
Because it's not big, right? It's a pretty...
No, it's only a couple hundred pages. That's obviously the subject matter, sexual assaults and rapes and violence. Like, that's why that book was banned. This one, actually, I found surprising. Number 3, A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. I would like to know why this was banned. Get the fuck out of here, America. I get this was written in, the 30s, but... Because this is about World War I.
Yeah.
And it's, I believe Farewell to Arms was the one. Yeah, it's the guy, he gets injured and he's pretty much like impotent. I don't think he can get an erection. Or maybe that was The Sun Also Rises. Maybe that was both books. I don't know. Hemingway had a weirdness for impotence. Like, he wrote about it a lot.
I wonder why.
I don't know. But anyway, this was labeled as a sex novel. That's why it was banned in schools and libraries. The government said it was it had too many adult scenes. Spencer,
not
if you want to talk about sex scenes that don't have anything about sex, really, like, come on. Fucking just, yeah. Number 4, this one's also surprising, but I think, we know why. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. It's because the protagonist's sidekick's name, Jim, his first name, which is not his real first name, is the N-word. And obviously, the subject matter. But that's one of those ones that gets, and I think we talked about this in the past, I think that should not only be taught in schools, I don't think it should be censored at all. No. I think kids need to know that that's a word that existed and was used heavily in negative connotation from its its original existence up till how it's used now. Because if kids listen to any rap song, they're gonna hear it 1,000 times. Granted, it's not meant in the same way, but I haven't read Huckleberry Finn yet, but I would imagine if Huckleberry Finn is calling his friend Jim that, he doesn't view it necessarily. Like, there would be nuance to that. Because it was not used all the time as necessarily an insult. It's just one of those things that, like, obviously was created as an insult.
And I also imagine it has to be one of those, like, Huckleberry, like, they're, him and his friend, they're kids, so they don't know that, like, is necessarily a bad word. That's just what you said. If
everyone said it back then, so it was in the vernacular. Number 5, Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I read this when I was in school, actually, and I don't remember. Kid gets hit in the head with a rock. It's pretty bad.
Well, don't they all just kind of go, like...
murdering each other?
Yeah, right?
But it's not like... nothing's graphic. I don't think that one should be... Like, I read that when I was, like, in middle school, too. I don't think that one should be banned.
I remember watching the movie in middle school.
Yeah. Number 6, well, again, this doesn't say they're banned now.
Yeah.
At one time, like most of them when they first came out, they were banned. Number 6, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Now, why was that banned? I never read that yet, but that's like one of those post-apocalyptic dystopian worlds, right?
Sounds like it.
Reproductive technology. Anyway, number 7, The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. That's another one that has profanity. I hate when that, like,
really?
It's just so funny because I remember being in school and, like, I don't remember if it was like The Grapes of Wrath or it was like some old book from like the 30s we had to read in English class. This was my 9th, 10th grade. And I remember our teacher specifically like stopping the class and be like, all right, there's some harsher language in here. And we didn't censor it. So when you read the book, there's going to be some words. And then we would do the readings out loud, which I always hated. And it was like, you'd read out loud and be like, if you're not comfortable saying the word, you don't have to. I'd be like, all right. So Johnny was walking down the damn street. And I'm like, damn would be the word, or hell. It wasn't even like, every once in a while, maybe a shit would get thrown in there. But like, that was like their censoring. It was like, it wasn't even anything extreme. It was like, come on. Like, as soon as me and my friends would walk out, cause he read that fucking pitch in there, making us read that stupid, but like, like, we were just so much worse. Like, I don't know if the teachers are just dumb or they just ignore, or maybe they just have to pretend they don't know the kids talk like that. And then that was also early 2000s when I was in high school. It's different now, probably. Number 8, 1984. We know why that was banned. Number 9, this one is a little surprising. The Shining by Stephen King. I guess this popularity, it was probably read by school-age children, but I didn't know that would be something that would be in school libraries to begin with, like back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Or was that the late 70s maybe that when that came out?
That probably was like the late 70s, probably.
And number 10, Slaughterhouse 5. That one, I don't see why that...
Yeah, why would you want to ban that?
Because that came out in, the 60s, I believe.
Probably?
It was considered dangerous because of the violent, irreverent, profane, and sexually explicit content. Fucking stupid.
The only, sexual content I could think of is whenever he was in the zoo.
Yeah.
Well,
And they were naked and
yeah,
stuff.
that's the only...
But it wasn't explicit. Well, Spencer, that was 20 banned books, current, and 10 from all time. What do you think?
Dumb.
I think we already covered our opinion on banning books. I think it's dumb. I think 99% of books probably shouldn't be banned in schools, but maybe with the caveat that they should be locked up in a special area, like we said, where teachers and parents have to agree to let the kids read it.
I'm surprised with the Shining, because if anything, if you're going to tell me that a Stephen King book was getting banned...
Carrie? Or Rage?
Rage, because he took that off the shelf himself,
Now it would be. Maybe it just wasn't that big of a deal before Columbine. I think that was the first real school shooting where people were because even in the Rage when you read it, it was there was a shooting, but it wasn't it's not the biggest deal. Nowadays we have so many fucking shootings, it's sickening. So yeah, I could imagine Rage would be banned now, but again, I don't. That's a tough one actually because where it's I don't think Rage should be banned in schools because kids are dealing with that. That seems more relevant than ever. But the way the book's written, the kid's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Almost you kind of like the kid and you're oh yeah, and you kind of yeah, shoot somebody, fuck it. As I was I was shoot the fucking teacher, fuck it. It's kind of cool.
He deserved it.
Yeah, so, I don't think kids should be reading that at all. Maybe.
We don't have an asshole teacher.
We should have had Ashley on because he's an actual parent and he's raising kids the proper way and he monitors what they're reading to a degree and stuff. He's not gonna let them just read straight up porn or anything. He'd be but I would imagine some of this stuff he would have probably a different opinion on than we do just because he actually has kids and knows what they're going through and what they're seeing. Because I have no idea what the fuck modern kids are doing anymore. I can only go by what we did as kids and that was gross enough. So could you imagine what kids are getting into now? Dude, I remember when I was between the ages of 13 and 16, I think it was. I might have been younger. I might have been between 11 and 16. Let's just fucking be very wide here with this age range. We got a Sega Dreamcast, and it could connect to the internet.
Uh-oh.
And my brother, who's 5 years older than me, immediately found the illicit pornos.
Oh, yeah.
Because back then, in its infancy, pornographic material, this is probably 1999, pornographic material was online was a lot different.
Yeah.
And it was very slow, but it was just very different. It's not how it is now. It's not instantaneous. It's very crude and rough. And we were just I just remember watching that, and I was just fucking think about an 11-year-old kid obsessed with it. Oh yeah. So it was just gross. So what are kids doing now where it just could be on their phone if they want?
Right.
Because we used to have kids that would fucking, draw dirty pictures or, hey, I got my dad's Playboy. What? No, I snuck it out of his room. And they, oh my God, that's, what does that thing do? Could you imagine kids now when little dirty Johnny comes into school and he got a whole fucking thing, he stole his dad's phone.
Yeah.
And he just got the world at his fingertips. I couldn't be a parent. No way. Anyway, that's an hour of madness down the toilet. So if you folks like what we do here at the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast, you can follow us. What could they follow us on? Facebook, Instagram at Drunken Pen Writing, or
the
Twitter, which is at Drunk Pen Writing. I wish they would give us the EN on that. Apparently they're putting on the edit button on Twitter finally.
Oh yeah?
Too little, too late. I don't give a shit about that anymore. You go and submit to our Halloween submission period. It is open until at least October. I haven't decided how. It depends how many we get, but we are accepting submissions, so make sure you check out the website and get all the deets on that. If you go on Twitter, it's the pinned tweet right now, so you can just click right on it. If you have any, inquiries about how to wrestle rhinos, especially if you live in Rio or Reno,
You got to control the horn.
You can go to Spencer's OnlyFans, the Rio/Reno Rhino Wrestler Church. We thank you for listening, and we will check you out next time. Also, if you thought this was an interesting episode, we'd love your comments on what we just talked about, because I would like various opinions on this. Maybe I'll bring it up. See, I would bring it up in the classic lit group we're in, but they get really fussy if it's not just strictly classic literature. They would want to talk about the second list, not the first one. But anyway, folks, thank you for listening. Check you later.